Hello and welcome everybody to another LinkedIn Live. This time it's with Sean and Belle. Belle, why don't you kick us off with a quick intro and then I'll finish up and then we'll go back to you.
Perfect. I'm Belle Walker with Bellevue Consulting. We take organizations from friction to function. So when organizations are collectively hitting that, what got you here won't get you there, trying to figure out what to do next with structures, processes, ways of working, all that good stuff. That's me. That's what I do. And I love it. How about you,
That's
Sean?
awesome. Yeah, and we're going to be talking a lot about that today. I'm Sean McLean. I'm the founder of Aloha Advisors. We focus more on the technical side of scaling and process improvement. A lot of it is around AI adoption, but also just the overall getting from the old school legacy systems to these modern integration friendly systems. We're going to be talking today about the human versus AI components of handling operational artifacts. Belle's going to kick us off with a nice breakdown of a couple very, very critical categories that should be important to you if you haven't started your operational and change management journey. So I'm going to kick it over to Belle, and then I'll be back in a little bit to talk more about the technology and AI side of how you can make some of these artifacts actually hum from the technology side. But we're going to have a little debate, and then we'll also be able to take questions if you guys have any. So you can put it in the chat and we'll be watching that, especially while we get things going. So Belle, take it away.
Thank you. And I would say less of a debate, more of a yes and, because this is one of those cases where we're going to go through three different tools. And for each one, we're going to talk through what it is, what the technology is that will support it, and then where the humans come into play still. And I think that is why Sean says maybe debate. I say maybe yes and, because there is space for both. And there's a need for both. If you're not using AI, if you're not using the newest technology for each of these tools, then I think you're doing yourself and your teams a disservice. That said, we are not ready to turn it over to the bots yet. There's still absolutely a need for humans in the loop. And we're going to go ahead and dig in on just what some of those tools are. So the first one I wanted to start with is one of my favorites. I've got a little slide here to walk through. This tool is called RACI, and so it's that RACI. So RACI is an acronym. It is for responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. And I've got these definitions here. Those of you who've worked with me know I actually often talk about this as ARCI, because I think it's easier to start by talking about the accountable, that single owner who approves work and ensures completion. But RACI is the most common term, so that's what I wanted to use here. Responsible, that second/first letter, is the people who are actually doing the work, and multiple people can be responsible, especially if it's a large or complex thing that you're undertaking. Knowing who's consulted, right, those experts who might provide input and feedback can help a lot as well, and making sure that stakeholders are informed, also incredibly valuable. So I thought it was interesting and helpful to map some of these roles to a little matrix that shows your decision authority and your involvement. And so I wanted to start with responsible. So the responsible parties have to have high involvement. That's the requirement. They are the doers. They are the ones actually involved in making this work happen. Now, there can be some variability in their decision authority. So the thing that's fixed is high involvement, but they may have moderately low decision authority, or they may have very high decision authority.
Hey Belle, can you share your screen one more time? I missed the approval for it. So
Oh, my bad. Have you not been able to see this the whole time?
yeah, we'll bring it back on. It came on for a sec, and then I accidentally moved it off. So go ahead one more time.
Oops, all good. Technology is still an adventure. Let's see.
All right.
All right,
There we go.
let me know when we're good.
Yep, now we got it.
Okay. So one more time, RACI, RACI, that's the default. ARCI, how I often talk about it. And ways to think about these roles, if we use a matrix or graph here between involvement and decision authority, are responsible folks. They're the ones juggling those plates. The requirement is they have high involvement. and they may have more or less decision authority. The flip side is our accountable folks who must have high decision authority. That's remember that critical rule: one accountable party per task, but they may have higher involvement or lower involvement. So it is possible for somebody who is accountable to only be tangentially involved, but still be made the one responsible or accountable for making those final decisions. The trick is our consulted and informed folks. So our consulted people are likely low involvement and low decision authority, and informed is even lower involvement and even lower decision authority. Now you may notice there's a big old gap here between low involvement and high decision authority, and that is intentional. You don't want folks that are making decisions to be too low on the involvement, because then you're not going to have high quality decisions. One of the most important parts of this tool, clarifying who can make those decisions, goes a long way towards streamlining progress, because you know when you do need to go to this CIDR and when you don't. But also, an incredibly overlooked part of this tool is these consulted and informed roles. The number of clients I've had who have actually unlocked progress just by recognizing that some of their folks are actually consulted and informed, not responsible, not accountable, incredible. So if you can say, I can never get feedback from this person, I never know what's going on, and you can realize that it's actually optional, that can make a really big difference. So highly recommend taking the time when you're starting a new project to lay out a RACI or an ARCI to be clear on who is doing what, when, why, making sure that those roles are transparent. Now, of course, that's the tool itself. Sean, you want to talk about how some technology might come into play when we're talking about a RACI?
Absolutely. So the one path that a lot of us have taken to be able to infuse AI into our lives are all around meeting note takers. And, love them or hate them, some people really do live and die by having an automated note taker and dialing it in. So there's quite a few out there, native to Zoom, Copilot, Gemini for Google Meetings, but also a lot of those third parties, including Fathom, Fireflies, all of the popular ones that you see that are joining some meetings. And a lot of the jokes are now that, in some meetings, we actually will have more note takers than participants, especially if everybody is bringing them to the table. So a lot of times, we're really coaching folks to do, especially on their operational journey, is not just use the note takers just purely for notes, but be able to actually pull them together for that critical information. And then you're also coaching, especially folks like Belle and myself, who are performing a lot of workshops, working with a lot of clients in meetings. And it's not just a, hey, how you doing type of meeting. It's actually very agenda driven. We're trying to pull specific information. And if you can get that information into the transcript and then build workflows on the back end so that you're actually pulling that information for action items and building types of artifacts like a RACI matrix, that is something that is very critical. So I want to really walk through that very quickly for you guys on how that can look. We'll have another session where we'll actually demo what this actually can do, because there's a lot of tools, including Claude Code, the new Cowork app, all the different bots that can actually build these systems for you. But also there's a way to do it in kind of the old school workflow way that I'll show you as well. So that anybody, even today, if you're watching this or watching the recording, you can snap this into any meeting and actually start to be able to use AI to build these tools. And the real TLDR here is that when you do build something as important as a RACI matrix or some of these other artifacts, like even basic project and process agendas and the different types of scope agreements and other types of components that you need to run your projects, the problem is keeping those up to date, right? A lot of us can do a one set and forget it type of approach with artifacts or documentations, but then being able to automatically manipulate those after things have changed, which we know they are, that is the big problem, right? Like we're talking about operational change management. You need to be able to have a tool that can move as quickly or more quickly than you do. And that's one of the biggest problems that we see day to day with our own businesses as well as our clients' businesses, is that you are just good enough as your most recent documentation. If you are pointing clients or new team members to your documentation and it's not correct, then everybody kind of comes back saying, this whole thing doesn't feel good. I don't really know that I'm making, the headway that I want to do. So one little quick example, and I'm using Claude for this, and that's becoming a little bit of my operating AI operating system of choice, just because we are really working so clearly in this new world. And I'm going to share my whole window here. So the real kind of nice aspect about this, and I'll kind of go from the top, and so you don't have to read through all this really quickly, is that I put in a very simple prompt that outlined a process that I wanted to do. And essentially, this is a process of being able to take everything out of a meeting transcript and put it into a system. So the short story is that if I'm running a meeting, say if Belle and I were having a meeting right now, I want the transcript to flow to some type of repository. In this case, I'm using Notion. That also can be used for project management and page like knowledge management. But you could use, ClickUp, you could use Asana, you could use really whatever platform that you're using for work. They can all be hooked into by APIs if they're a next gen tool. And that is one of the cool parts about this, is that it can flow once you set it up forever for all of your meetings, especially if it's being trained to listen for these types of triggers. So that is one of the secret sauces, is that if you're having a meeting and you have a lot of meetings about process improvement or operational artifacts, you can build it to look for those types of triggers. You can even name meetings specifically around that, so that the workflows are set up to trigger right off of names of meetings or even meeting attendees. So all of these things can be lined up. I'm calling out Zapier here to be able to flow the information between the different platforms. Zapier does have a lot of native integrations, so it's very, very easy that you can actually plug in with natural language, just typing in Zapier to say, hey, I want to connect Fathom to Notion. Boom, done. It really doesn't take much more than that. You do have to manipulate where the data goes. And also, I'm calling out here that I want, in this case, Claude to be in the middle, to actually be able to use a connection to Figma to be able to map out what's going on here. So in this case, I've actually had it create an output using a Figma connection. And Figma, if you haven't used it, is starting to become one of the go-to diagramming tools that can be connected to any type of AI interface. So it has connections to ChatGPT, Gemini, as well as Claude. But the Claude connection for me has worked the best. So I really recommend playing with it. And the really nice thing is that it shows you in the chat window exactly what it looks like. And then I can actually click in this window right here. It says edit in Figma, and it'll pull up the actual Figma full diagram, where I can then manipulate it. I'm going to go to the hand tool to be able to do it. I can make it, bigger. I can zoom in, zoom out, just by using the different tools. But also I can start manipulating this if I want to. So I can actually select a box, I can move it, I can add more decision trees. It color coded it automatically by application that I'm using in this workflow. And then it's calling out all the different steps that I asked it to do. So again, I'm horrible at doing diagramming art. I'm not an artist, and some people are really good at doing whiteboard style diagramming. Like Figma is essentially a very, very detailed whiteboarding tool with multiple interfaces. But when you use the workflows from what we do all day in meetings, you don't have to be an artist. It can actually get you a first draft that looks really good, just like this, and then be able to take it from there. So when I've now built this workflow, I can then start to also automate the different types of artifacts that are coming through. So then I actually set up to have branching. We're going to talk about a couple more artifacts next that Belle's going to go over. But the big one that we're talking about right now is being able to get a RACI diagram. And RACI diagrams and matrices can be a lot of different ways. So I actually had it just do a basic, kind of looks like an org chart style. So again, I'm going to edit in Figma. I already had it pulled up in the chat. And this is a really cool way that you can break things down, where you can actually have the accountable, the responsible, the informed, the consulted. I'm not sure why I put report to, but I'll edit that out. Very easy to edit it out. Again, this is a good example where if you do see quick things, this is not static, right? It's not like a PDF where you have to turn it back in. I can easily do some manipulations here on the
Right, if you
fly.
want that project
And
owner
I
to be bold as opposed to indicate bold.
Exactly. Yeah. You can change the fonts, you can do it all, you can make it nice. You can also put it into an actual box matrix like you see a lot of RACI diagrams. If you want to do that, you just have to, drag and drop. But again, it gives you this nice starting piece to be able to do it. And for a lot of us, that's just what we need. We need it to be updated, absolutely from that meeting. And so in this situation, I basically emulated that. If Belle and I were having a meeting with a client and we're talking about like consulting with Belle and I'm the accountable person, Jim and Kathy are going to be informed, Jane and Bob are going to be running the show. We now have pulled in a visual representation of what we just talked about, potentially for many minutes or hours, and we have that artifact ready to go. So I'm going to turn it back over to Belle, because RACI is just one critical component of a visual artifact that can help run a full process and project around your change management. But Belle, why don't you take us into the
Well, before
next
we go to the
one?
next one,
Because
I promised 3 pieces for each of these tools,
oh, that's
right?
right.
And,
Yep.
so the
Yeah.
first piece, what is it, right? It's laying out those different
Mhm.
roles. Second piece, how do you get there with technology? Sean reminded us, right, as you're capturing all of those, notes and have the note takers, you can use that entire database and knowledge base to create suggestions and say, "This is what the RACI is,"
Mhm.
or if you agree in your meeting, you can create that visual artifact. What can't the technology do? Where are the people still coming into play? And I would say that first and foremost, the technology is not at a place to tell us this is who is accountable, this is who is responsible, this is who's consulted, this is who's informed, and then have a team just take that as given, right? We cannot, no matter how tempting it may be, abdicate our own accountability for confirming what those roles are, even if they've been suggested based on a knowledge base. Now, what it
Mhm.
can do is give us something to think about, right? If you go through the meeting and then you ask, your favorite Claude, analyze this set of meeting notes for this project. Please pull out who appears to be the accountable party. Please show me who appears to be responsible, who appears to be consulted, who appears to be informed. That can give you incredible insights into how people are stepping up and into their roles, who may be overstepping and marching on someone else's toes. And it can tell you who may be abdicating some of that responsibility or accountability. And this is something that I wish we had had in some of my roles in the past, where we could have pulled it out and said, hey, this person is accountable. They need to be making decisions, and there's no record of them making firm decisions, even when asked sometimes. And so that's probably first and foremost what the humans still need to be in the loop for with a RACI, is confirming that those roles are what they should be, and then following through on it, right? In real time, there are tools, AI tools, that are helping with things like sales and giving prompts to team members when they're on a sales call. What I have not seen is an AI tool that is in a meeting nudging people and saying, "Hey, Sean, you're accountable on this project. Why haven't you jumped in here?"
Mhm.
Right? It's time for a decision. Or, "Hey, Belle, you are responsible on this project. Why are you asking Sean, who is consulted over here, to be doing that work? And so this is an incredibly powerful tool. There is absolutely already a place for AI, for these automations to be augmenting and supplementing and helping us get to an effective use faster. We are not yet ready to say, hey, take it over. The race is all yours. We're just along for the ride.
That's a great point. And I think, with the of some of these new custom software apps that can be created by end users, non-technical people, I have high confidence that there are going to be systems like that evolving where you do have some project management tools that can work in that same methodology, like have triggers. A lot of
Yep.
project managers and product managers, that's their whole job of just like calling up people all day, having meetings, having stand-ups, and then checking on the status. But if we have a system that can asynchronously do that for us, to your point, that not only reduces the amount of busy work that some of those managers have to do, but it also can make those systems extremely more cohesive and smart, so that for most of us that are bouncing around all different things all day, we need those critical reminders like, oh, actually, I do owe Belle a status report on these things, and that's going to be my next
Yeah.
half hour, right? If we had that type of accountability that is then merging with our daily calendars and our task management, and then also reprioritizing, because also we have our personal lives, we have kids that need attention, we have all these other things that need to happen. We need that diverse element to be able to move around, and that's definitely not there yet.
We're
But
partway
we,
there, right?
yeah,
You can tie in these artifacts. You can get those nudges about, hey, you owe Belle this thing. What I think you can't get is you need to add this to your list specifically because of your role in this
right.
project.
Exactly. Yeah. It's moving in that direction. And I think that's part of where a lot of us, as we've grown up in our careers, have had kind of this, crazy second brain that can keep us accountable for our own responsibilities on projects. But it does get to a point where it's just too burdensome. And I've heard that across every one of my clients. It's like, I can't keep this stuff straight. And with some of my clients, they're being asked to maintain multiple, sometimes double digit project management or process management tools. So now you have not only multiple projects you're managing, but also all these different interfaces. And for people that are more non-technical, that is a hellish way to run your workday. So it really does turn into more, how can it be simplified and how can it be aggregated back to me, as well as for leadership, so that they can see everything. And they should have, especially, they don't want to see the granular details that are coming out of some of these accountability types of roles. They just want to see the roadmap. They want to see how these lower level types of tasks are now rolling up to the overall timeline. Is it going to have to be pushed back? Is the cost going up? And that kind of rolls into our second artifact a little bit as well, right?
Yeah, and so I'm just gonna recap that quickly because this is, I think, gonna be the theme we
Mm,
have, right? These can help you generate artifacts, save you incredible time there, can help you nudge. What it cannot do is make final decisions or, in certain circumstances, allocate that responsibility to the people, even if it is helping to document or propose what those uh, to-do items are.
mhm.
All right, let me know when you can see my screen again, because we're going to move on to that second tool, which
Got it.
is awesome. OKRs.
Mm,
What are OKRs? It's aligning goals with results. So O stands for objective, KR stands for key results. Basically, the point of this framework is to have something big and meaty and ambitious that you're trying to do. So, in this incredibly generic example,
mm,
inspire growth and focus. But if it's that abstract, how do you make sure that you're actually making progress? How do you know when you're done? That's where the key results come in. And 3 to 5 is the general rule of thumb. Again, delightfully theoretical example. this one you could have a key result of product adoption increased by 30% or NPS up to 60 or reducing churn by 3% monthly if we're talking about growth and focus. Now, I will say that if you have an actual business, I would add a little more detail to these. So NPS for which product, which department, but this hopefully gives you a good idea of what the basics of OKRs are about. It's really about goal setting, being very clear what those big picture goals are, and then having the detail you need to be able to actually measure and deliver on those goals. And so, Sean, how can you use technology, especially some of the new AI tools, in the context of OKRs?
Apologies, just had to reboot the other side of the stream. The main comparison that I want to draw is similar is that you can have OKR matrices as well as systems, right? So in some of these different operational model worlds, you are going to have actual software around your goals. And in like the Microsoft world, for example, they do have Viva Insights and other aspects where you can really tie goal setting to your actual actionable data. So if for example, some tech oriented organizations might say, we need you, to be attached to your computer 8 hours a day, and that's where people have the little fake mouse jiggles, so if they're doing other things it still looks like they're online. And that can also be for Slack organizations, Teams organizations, and whatnot. But that is also
Part of why I recommend never having pure activity
right.
goals.
Those
Here's
are
what you do, not how many times you move. What did you accomplish with those mouse clicks, not how many mouse clicks were there.
exactly. It's a self-defeating purpose, but that is one of the things that certain corporate overlords will say, hey, we need to make sure we have butts and seats, and that's going to be part of your goal. If you're like, say, a customer service rep or a sales rep, you might also be tracking on your calls that you're making through the approved systems, not on your cell phone. You're actually using the corporate VoIP phone. That's all being logged. You're probably using a tool like Gong or other types of systems to be able to have full, recording capabilities and all those types of things. So all of that amounts to data, and data can easily be then put right into a database that can then be visualized so that you can have that access. And that's where AI can really shine, because it can pull out the anomalies and the other problems of certain aspects of data, like, hey, was this person actually doing their allocated 20 calls a day, or were they just flat out calling random numbers on the list and then just hanging up because they wanted to do other things, right? You can really start looking at trends, especially if somebody is just complaining on the sales type of the job, saying, well, I'm getting bad leads, so they're hanging up on me. I can't tell if marketing is not giving me hot leads. I don't know what to do. Is that true? Are they actually bad leads, or is that actually what's happening? So a lot of times for me on the technical side, I'll be the one in the organization that other leaders will come to and be like, we need proof that these goals are tenable. Are they able to be met? Are they actually being reported back that it's a technology is the problem, or the process is the problem, or there's no training? Like there's always excuses that we hear about not hitting goals. And so a lot of the part of AI and technology is proofing out if that is true, and then also trying to give other options to be able to meet some of those goals or make them more of a smarter goal set, right? And that's where there are all these other ways that you can then, not necessarily move the goalpost of setting goals for organization, especially around operational change, but also being able to move that. So one other dashboard that I want to call out here that's really important for this type of thing, especially in the OKR world, is that process metric goal. And a lot of times, we talked a little about this last time, there will be certain types of process metrics that are around cost and time. So in professional services organizations or knowledge worker organizations, that can be really easily allocated to, okay, what's the person's, salary slash cost to the organization. That's usually their salary plus overhead and benefits and whatnot. And then how much time did it take? Multiply that by the iterations of how many times that process went across the whole year. And now you actually have a metric that can be broken down by, year, month, day, work hours, all of those different little granular pieces. And that can be the critical aspect of using something like AI. Again, if you are being able to map out tools like Figma with the help of a different AI model, you are able to also plug in some of those tools that can then clock how things are happening, not make it subjective, right? A lot of us can say, well, on average, again, we have these meetings all the time. On average, it takes me, an hour to do my expense report every day. And we're doing it in Excel. And I can tell you that there's a better way for me to spend my time than doing an hour worth of expense allocations, which are very important for the company, right? Especially if I am spending a lot, I want to make sure that we're reconciling that, we're getting the payback, we're billing it to the client, all those really critical business functions. But if every person or organization is spending a day of their work life doing that expense allocation, does that make sense? Should you move to a system like Ramp or Bill or whatever to be able to do it in a smart way where you're just taking a picture of the receipt, you're categorizing it, and it takes literally like 30 seconds to do it versus an hour to do it?
Or be
That can
updating to a high trust policy. There was just a great discussion, Bob Sutton weighed in on LinkedIn recently. I'll link to it in the comments after,
Oh, cool.
around expense reporting as a health metric for culture.
Oh, yeah. That's a big
But
one
sorry,
too.
I'll circle back on that when we get to, where humans come into play.
Yeah, and it's such a great example because there's so many of those types of business functions where it becomes a lot of times, especially as people move back and forth from like different companies, they'll always come in and say, "Oh man, my last company, we never had to do any of this crap. It's so much easier if we just do X, Y, Z, like adopt a new tool like Ramp." And for then the business impact and the operational change, that's where you do, if you're in that role, you have to basically say, well, here's the cost of the software, here's the cost of change. All of these things go into that goal of saying, okay, we are building an change in ROI metric that states that if our current cost and our current like process cost is somewhere in that realm of, we have 100 employees and it costs, 40 hours across our whole organization to do expense management a week, you can easily break that down and saying, here's the cost. Here is what we're trying to reduce this cost in time as well as money if we're going to adopt a system and make that incrementally lower. And that's also the piece around AI adoption in general. If you are adopting something that can do for you what would generally take potentially 10x the time, and now you're doing a fraction of the time to be able to get the same result or better result, those are the metrics that you really should be pulling together and monitoring so that you validate it. You don't just want to say, oh, well, in a very small microcosm, I know I save time. But then over time, maybe as things get more complex, it starts getting deeper and deeper into longer time periods. And now it's like, well, did we really save time? Maybe that gap is starting to shrink, and maybe the cost of the new application is also going up. And that is, I'll let Belle kind of talk about this, but that is the risk of actually using AI tools that you're not governing these metrics around, because it can easily become much more expensive without that check, because the tokenization of AI tools, especially when you get started, they want you to feel good about the adoption. So a lot of times these systems do not ding you for tokened overages in like even the first 30 days, 60 days, sometimes the first year. But then as you do get down into it, especially if it's they bill differently on usage, that's where they can really get you. And now all of a sudden now you're really being beholden. Like, not only is this not saving us as much time as we thought, but it also is becoming much more expensive than we thought. And the other issue with a lot of these new systems is the price is only going to go up. It is not going to be standard. And what we're recommending to a lot of people in this age of adoption is to not lock in long-term contracts until a lot of these systems are also stabilized. So you do have a little bit of an ebb and flow there, even before we get to the human element of it. So Belle, take it away on that side. I think there is a lot that can be helped on this side with the human element over AI.
Interesting. I was going to say with OKRs, I think this is actually one where you get a huge bang for your buck on the automation end, with some of those caveats you hinted on at the end, right? That there are very real questions around the cost, the processing power, the investment, right? There's part of the way we have formed our organizational hierarchies where we expect that junior folks come in and do what we often consider rote work. And this spans white collar, blue collar roles, that when people first come in, they are not expected to know how things work, how to do the advanced analysis, bringing things together. And so we train people by giving them these small, repetitive or detailed tasks that are part of a bigger picture and slowly grow up that knowledge base over time. And that is something that AI inverts and very much turns on its head, that often an LLM, generative AI, a lot of the models that are out there have kind of the big picture. What they don't have is the discrete detail that is applicable to your business and your organization. And so a lot of onboarding these tools is really about getting the detail for your specific case from the big picture, as opposed to the details being generic and ramping up. That said, I think it really comes down to the final decision making being one of the big gaps. So I love this example of expense reports, because doing expense reports is something that AI can help with immensely, right? And there's great tools for that, and you touched on some of them. Redesigning your expense flow and your process, also somewhere that I think AI can help to some extent with recommendations for optimization, definitely with the documentation and the communication. What I think AI is still falling short on is being able to dictate and do you want it to dictate, but it is not yet at a point where it can, whether or not it should dictate the culture around a decision like expense reporting. So something that I've seen and measured with various clients is, and this just came up at the conference I was at last week, the cost to the organization of per diems versus itemized expense reports. And so there's some exceptions people like to jump to. Well, it's a sales dinner and I have 50 people. And so we're not talking about that. We're talking about sort of standard individual employee travel, work travel, where you're not hosting large meals. It's just, I'm there, I need to go do my work and come back. And in those cases, you can optimize the bejeebus out of your expense reporting flow, and you are probably never going to have a lower cost to the business than if you just give a per diem. Because then it is nobody does any work. However, that is a very high trust entitlement, because if you are going to have employees that want to stay with you, you need to give that per diem high enough that it can actually cover food and whatever else it is intended to cover in the market that's there. Otherwise, you're sowing distrust, you're undermining your business. That's a true cultural choice, right? Or there may be reasons why, for regulatory reasons, you have to know which restaurants your employees ate at. So there's pieces there that AI, I think, cannot really weigh in on, but really defining and deciding what that culture is, whether you want to save that time through that high trust model, or it is important for other reasons, the messaging that it sends, to have that itemized detail. That is something where we still need leaders. We still need humans making those decisions to govern and build and reinforce the culture that they want.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think there's so many of those real corporate governance and cultural change management issues that are way, way, way far down the line in what technology can answer, because it does need that human interaction. Obviously, most technologists in the AI world are going to say, well, that's why we have the human in the loop and all these workflows. So you're going to have that opportunity to always run it through people to approve, people to update and edit, which I think is also the critical path right now for any of these types of, we'll call them elevated workflows, because you do need to have that aspect for governance, for checking, for all of the things that you just talked about. But there's also nuance that is not going to be a time saver for using
Yep.
technology, that I think is really intuitive for what you brought out, because there's just a lot of human expertise that cannot be replicated, and that's for a lot of industries. That is the main reason why they're not still jumping 2 feet into the pool, around, things like legal research or cultural, diagnostics, or a lot of the different other human to human style processes, because they do feel that it's not a tangible ROI quite yet. Others, more low hanging fruit, are going to give you that. So yeah, it's a good like flip over to our last artifact, which is
Yep.
going to be dealing more with what are the risks of these types of things, right?
Yeah, so speaking of risks, let me know when we can see the screen again. I want to walk through what folks who are following my LinkedIn have seen as my current absolute favorite tool right now to
Do it
talk
one more
about.
time. It just disappeared on me. I got to make sure we
Okay.
figure this out.
Things that technology cannot do.
Yeah,
Click
that
all the
part,
buttons.
they definitely changed a little bit of it, so I got to get that wired in.
All right, let me
We
know.
got you now. Mhm.
Perfect. All right, my favorite tool to talk about right now is risk registers. And thank you for everyone who's bearing with us through this live, still watching the recording. Just wanted to give you a quick shout out and a thank you. When we talk about risk registers, in the end, you want something that looks about like this, that's got some sort of reference or ID, a description of the risk that you're talking about, priority, category, likelihood, et cetera, et cetera. What you cannot do, sadly, is just fill it in left to right. So
Mhm.
I want to just give a couple examples to build out what this is, and then we can really dig in on what the value of a tool like this is. So, quick examples: you might have your largest customer could terminate a contract, a key employee could give notice, you could have a power outage at the main office, and I can't see Sean's face right now, but I'm willing to bet that if I say this is a risk because maybe you have a server running in your office, he's going to make some faces for us. But you can go through and then categorize these and say, oh, this is a revenue risk, this is a personnel risk, this is facilities. That allows you later to look only at your revenue risks and sort of prioritize within that bucket. It's important to know whether it's low or high likelihood. It's important to know what the impact of that risk realizing would be. And I also recommend having a separate artifact that lets you kind of combine likelihood and impact into an overall uh, feed into priority, et cetera.
Mhm.
So you need an owner, because once you know what the risk is and you've got a sense of the likelihood and impact, you may need somebody to dig in deeper. For example, in this particular company, the CHRO happens to own facilities, and they took a look at this power outage and said, high impact, what are you talking about? We put in a whole backup generator. The impact is actually going to be low. So
Mhm.
when you're confident that you've got everything correct, likelihood and impact, then you can add in your priority. Now, what something like this does, it gives you a point of reference that you can build into for seeing where your energy is best used. However, one of the most valuable things about a risk register like this is the process of building it out, actually having to take a step back and think through what are the risks that you can see. This
Mhm.
is an incredibly powerful communication tool going up and down the organizational hierarchy, because the things that frontline folks are going to put on a risk register very likely different from the things that the C-suite are putting on a risk register. And so what that does is allow some of those concerns that may not be visible at the top level to bubble up. If something that's spotted down on the front lines continues to be a top priority as it goes up the organizational hierarchy, you may not have found that any other way. Conversely, it also allows for the C-suite to help put some context around things that may be very impactful to a handful of individuals, but not highly impactful to the entire organization. And so being able to share those big picture risks down the hierarchy can help folks all across the organization understand some of the perspective of what that broad impact is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a big fan of these tools for communication and for prioritization and for guiding, but there are ways that you can create and generate them and leverage them technically through AI, right, Sean?
Exactly. And the beautiful example that Belle just showed is that this is a very similar build out to any spreadsheet tool. So if you're using Excel, Google Sheets, Smartsheet, etc., you can have a risk register with smart triggers in each cell. And this is the one big thing that a lot of my clients are continuing to ask that AI is going to be a part of, is that if you have a change to your risk register that you want to be able to alert, and you can also have it be alerted with the different types of changes that are occurring. So for example, what Belle just mentioned is around that power mitigation, is that if that change actually comes about and it's on the corporate side, the leadership side of the risk register, where they're like, hey, what's going on with all these power outages? We got to do something about it. And CHRO was like, we implemented a generator, months ago. Like, that's not an issue. That conversation can be obviously boosted by the fact that, well, why wasn't I alerted? I'm like, well, you were, if we have that system that when that change actually happens and you've moved it from a high risk of occurrence to a low risk of occurrence, that everybody that is attached to that project, even if your whole C-suite wants to be informed of those types of changes, again, going back to the racy style, now you can build in those automations for that communication. The critical part of adoption of all of these types of artifacts is, again, making it tangible, making it current, and making it transparent, so that it's also finding the team members where they work, and not forcing somebody to actually go into a system themselves and just be like, oh, I'm curious about the risk register for the accounting team right now, so I'm going to go in and just dabble into their Notion page, or Slack page, or wherever that lives in your organization. That's not going to happen, right? We know that if the executive team is focused on other things, they're going to need to have that push to them. And so that's either, again, a Slack message, a Teams message, an email, all of the above. It needs to come to them. And so then if they are interested, or they are aware of those changes, that's where AI can easily pull that together. And then also send a digest of the changes to be able to say, hey, over this past month, here's all the changes that we had to our risk. Here's the real risks that could affect you, CEO, that are really important to the aspects that you're doing. And that's the inflection point, I think, of where AI is starting to actually go now with a lot of the LLMs. Like OpenAI, Claude, Gemini are really trying to be your one-stop shop, both on your computers as well as on devices. Eventually, they're moving into more of that aspect like we've seen in sci-fi movies, where you basically get up and you say, hey, what's going on with my day today? Who's what's going on with the news, what's the weather, all those little updates. But as the systems learn more about what's important to you, they're going to highlight those types of things. And it could be, well, the generator that you were waiting on was installed overnight and tests are showing great. Here's your most key update of the day, so that you're brushing your teeth or doing other things, and you're hearing essentially everything that's in your email, your Slack messages, your Teams messages. That is one of the real critical parts where technology is starting to now boost our day. And And some of us might say, I don't want that. I don't want to know everything that's in work. I want to be able to spend a couple hours, going through my email. The rest of us are like, I just want my top checklist of what I'm supposed to do and everything that I'm being reported to. And if I can do that while I drive to work in the morning or while I'm on a flight to a next client meeting, then that's going to save me a lot of time. So, Belle, how about from your perspective, where would technology not really meet the ability to handle that communication and awareness around risks?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. One is the generative AI, the LLMs, a lot of what you'd be doing to source risks here are very good and probably going to think of some things that the humans in the conversation are not going to think of. And I have yet to be in one of these conversations where the humans do not come up with something that the AI missed.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so this is one where I feel like truly using AI as a thought partner can up level, but relying entirely on the AI tools to know and surface and assess your risk is inevitably going to be a challenge, right? You've referenced that second mind, right, and sort of externalizing parts of our brains. I think we're doing better with that, and there's still information in here that's not in any of the data that the AI tools have access to. And so just recognizing that there are some limits in terms of what's available, what can be there, and realizing that truly owning and addressing often comes from these deeper conversations goes a long way towards moving the conversation forward.
Oh, that's such a great point and a good one to end on, because a lot of us, we refer to that type of knowledge as tribal knowledge, cultural knowledge, executive knowledge, all those different categories. But really what it comes down to is it is the non-tabulated, non-written down, non-documented knowledge that we know all of our businesses have a lot of. And for a lot of businesses that have had longevity with certain key roles, that's both a pro and a con from a lot of our perspectives, because you have like this amazing go-to group of people that just know that they've tried certain things that have not worked. So we're not going to go back down that road. And these are the actual things that will work really well for different situations. AI doesn't have access to that. And so it is really critical to think about as another type of risk to our business. We have that change happening right now, right? We have a lot of retirements, a lot of people that are transitioning out of the corporate world. We need to get that knowledge. We need to be able to put that into a system that can be utilized. It's not going to be very efficient, because obviously if you're doing exit interviews with folks, sometimes that is limited, right? The HR team might just be asking about, hey, what worked, what didn't work? Is there any, open items? They're not going to go back 20 years and saying, hey, what are these key components that you didn't map out? That's not going to happen, but you do have to be very thoughtful about how you try to mine that type of information, because once it's gone, right? Those folks no longer work for you. You're not going to be able to always call them up and say, hey, remember that, boiler room, you have the code for that. I don't think anybody actually has the key. And those can be situations that seem like it wouldn't happen very much,
Yeah, I
but
wish that was a joke, but
right.
that sounds incredibly specific.
It's like, hey, how do we get down there? There's something beeping, right? It's like all of those types of situations really do pop. And they're key risks when you don't have that level of governance. I've seen, folks in that same situation where they're like, well, I got to get the saw out and cut through a bunch of doors because nobody knows how to get through this lock. Obviously, there's ways to get into that, but if you just had the knowledge, you can avoid having to take that type of aggressive posture. And that's the same with trying to get information just out of rolling back to a proper way to do expense worksheets. How did we do this before? What are the risks of maybe not going down that same road where it was a total crash and burn before. Like, how have we able to learn from our foibles in the past? In some cases, it's good to have a short memory, but in other cases, you do want to leverage that long memory. So I think that's my take. What's your final take on the human side of, handling the risk?
I think my final take on the human side is just to note that we still matter, right? When it comes to, I think we can go a long way towards identifying more risks, having more effective prioritization, coming up with more impactful strategies when we fold these tools and these workflows into our lives. And the humans are still the core when it comes to risk assessment, risk management, and being able to prevent the risk from even making it onto the list because they're top of mind, because we're thinking through it. I think that humans are going to be critical for quite a long time when it comes to risk and when it comes to all three of these, right? So circling back through, I think the running theme from my end is that whether you're talking about RACEs or OKRs or risk registers, there's incredible value and potential in bringing AI tools in, particularly for some of the pieces that humans really dislike doing around documentation, around some of the visualization. We can speed things up, we can streamline communication, and the final decisions, the final actions we still own as humans, the vision and what we're trying to build and our actions that take us there. And that's not going to change anytime soon.
100%. Yeah. And if you do need help getting started in both of these worlds, reach out to Belle, reach out to me. We provide active discovery and assessments to be able to help your business get on this path. So if any of this resonated with you as a pain point, that's why we're having these talks. It's going to give you some little glimpses and models of what can be snapped into your organization very efficiently and quickly in some cases to start making these changes really effective. And again, for a proper AI adoption, it's really difficult to do any of this unless you start with Belle. Like, you really need that operational model to be able to make your investment in change pay off. So, Belle, any final words before we end this stream?
Right people, right processes, right tools, still the things that you need to run your business most effectively. It's just that some of those right tools are changing.
Yes, changing big time. So that's a great way to pick it up. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I know I didn't see any questions right now, but again, this is going to be recorded as well as republished all the time. So if you do have any questions, you can DM either one of us or add it to this event as you're watching it. We will get alerts when those types of questions still pop into the chat. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Have a great rest of your day.